When both pilots collapsed at 30,000 feet, Flight 447 faced certain death. No passenger knew how to fly. Then two 8-year-old twin girls stood up from row 9. "We can land this plane," they said calmly. What happened next became the most incredible emergency landing in aviation history. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The morning sun painted the Chicago skyline in shades of gold and amber as passengers shuffled through O'Hare International Airport's bustling Terminal 3. Among the sea of travelers, two identical 8-year-old girls walked with unusual confidence, their matching aviation-themed backpacks bouncing with each step. Sarah and Emma Mitchell weren't ordinary children, and today would prove that in ways no one could have imagined. Sarah clutched a well-worn flight manual against her chest, its pages marked with colorful tabs and handwritten notes. Emma carried her prized possession, a meticulously detailed replica of a Boeing 737-800, the exact model they were about to board. Their mother, Rebecca Mitchell, walked beside them, smiling at how her daughters studied every aircraft visible through the terminal windows. "Mom, look! That's a 737-900ER, Emma pointed excitedly. "You can tell by the extended fuselage and the winglet configuration." Rebecca shook her head in amazement. "Your father has really trained you girls well." Captain James Mitchell, their father, was a decorated instructor at the United States Air Force Academy. From the moment the twins could walk, he had immersed them in the world of aviation. Their playroom resembled a mini flight school, complete with a sophisticated home simulator that cost more than most people's cars. While other children played video games, Sarah and Emma logged flight hours, studied aerodynamics, and memorized emergency procedures. Flight 447 to Denver is now boarding at Gate B-17, the announcement echoed through the terminal. As they approached the gate, Sarah turned to her sister. "Remember what Dad always says?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Stay calm, assess the situation, and trust your training." Neither girl could have known that within the next few hours, those words would become the difference between life and death for 147 people. Boarding and takeoff. Captain Rick Torres settled into the left seat of Flight 447's cockpit, running through his pre-flight checklist with the practiced ease of someone who had done this thousands of times. At 53 years old, with 25 years of flying experience and over 15,000 flight hours, Torres was one of the airline's most respected pilots. His co-pilot, First Officer Mike Chen, a talented 35-year-old aviator with 8 years of commercial flying experience, occupied the right seat. "Weather looks perfect for Denver," Chen observed, studying the meteorological report on his display. "Clear skies, light winds. Should be smooth sailing." Torres nodded, reaching for his coffee thermos. As he took a sip, he winced slightly, pressing his hand against his chest. "You okay, Captain?" Chen asked, concern flickering across his face. "Just heartburn," Torres dismissed it with a wave. "Too much coffee this morning." "I'm fine." Neither pilot noticed the unusual bitter taste in their coffee that had been accidentally contaminated during the catering truck's maintenance issues earlier that morning. The chemical leak from a cleaning solution into the beverage system was a 1-in-a-million accident that would soon create an unprecedented crisis. In the cabin, Sarah and Emma settled into seats 9A and 9B, window and middle seat respectively. As the flight attendants performed the safety demonstration, both girls followed along with intense focus, their lips moving as they silently recited the procedures they had memorized years ago. The passenger in 9C, a businessman named David Hartford, smiled at the girls. "You two seem very interested in the safety briefing." "Our dad's a pilot," Sarah explained. "He taught us that safety procedures are the most important part of any flight. He also taught us that 95% of accidents happen during takeoff and landing," Emma added. "That's why you always have to pay attention during those phases." Hartford chuckled, impressed. "Well, you two certainly know your stuff." Flight attendant Jessica Martinez moved through the cabin, ensuring everyone was properly seated and buckled. With 12 years of experience, she had developed an instinct for reading passengers and sensing when something felt off. Today, everything seemed normal, just another routine morning flight to Denver. At 9:47 a.m., Flight 447 pushed back from the gate. Torres guided the aircraft to runway 28R, receiving clearance from air traffic control. The twin engines spooled up, and the Boeing 737 accelerated down the runway, lifting gracefully into the crystal-clear Illinois sky. Positive rate, gear up, Torres called out as they climbed. Gear up, Chen confirmed, raising the landing gear lever. The flight climbed smoothly through 10,000 feet, then 20,000 feet, eventually leveling off at their cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. The autopilot engaged, and the aircraft settled into its programmed flight path toward Denver. The crisis begins. 45 minutes into the flight, with the Boeing 737 cruising peacefully above the patchwork farmland of Iowa, Sarah had her flight manual open, explaining a complex systems diagram to Emma. "See, the hydraulic systems are triple redundant," Sarah pointed to the illustration. "That means even if two systems fail, you still have enough control to land safely." Emma studied the diagram intently. "But what if all three fail?" "Then you use manual reversion," Sarah replied. "It's much harder, but Dad says a good pilot can still land the plane using just cables and manual inputs." In the cockpit, Captain Torres suddenly felt a wave of dizziness wash over him. His vision blurred, and his chest tightened with crushing pressure. He reached for the radio, trying to call out, but his words came out garbled. "Rick? Rick, what's wrong?" Chen turned to his captain, alarmed. Torres's face had gone pale and waxy. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he clutched his chest. "Mike, something's wrong," he gasped before slumping forward over the control yoke. The sudden weight on the controls caused the autopilot to disengage with a sharp warning tone. The aircraft's nose pitched down slightly, and warning lights began illuminating across the instrument panel. "Rick! Stay with me!" Chen shouted, checking for a pulse. There was none. Torres had suffered a massive cardiac arrest. The contaminated coffee had triggered a fatal arrhythmia in his already stressed cardiovascular system. Chen's training kicked in immediately. He keyed the radio with trembling hands. "Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Denver Center, this is Flight 447. We have a medical emergency. Captain is unconscious, I'm..." But before he could finish his transmission, Chen felt his throat constrict. The same contaminated coffee he had consumed was affecting him, though differently. His vision darkened at the edges, his muscles weakened, and consciousness slipped away like sand through fingers. The coffee cup fell from his hand, spilling across the center console as he collapsed beside his captain. Flight 447, with no one at the controls and the autopilot disengaged, began a shallow descent. Chaos in the cabin. In the passenger cabin, most people remained unaware of the unfolding crisis. Some read books, others dozed, and a few worked on laptops. But those with sensitive hearing noticed the subtle change in engine pitch and the barely perceptible nose-down attitude of the aircraft. Jessica, stationed near the front galley, felt the change immediately. Her years of experience had attuned her to every nuance of flight. Something was wrong. She waited a moment, hoping it was just a minor altitude adjustment, but when the unusual attitude persisted, she moved toward the cockpit. She knocked firmly on the reinforced door. No response. She knocked again, harder. Still nothing. Using her key, Jessica unlocked the cockpit door and pushed it open. What she saw would haunt her for the rest of her life: both pilots slumped unconscious, warning lights flashing across the instrument panel, and the altitude reading slowly decreasing, 29,500 feet. 29,400 feet. 29,300 feet. "Oh my God," she whispered, her professional composure shattering for a moment before training reasserted itself. She grabbed the radio handset. "Denver Center, this is Flight Attendant Jessica Martinez on Flight 447. We have an emergency. Both pilots are unconscious. I repeat, both pilots are down. The response from Denver Center came quickly but with barely concealed alarm. Flight 447, Denver Center. Please confirm, both pilots are incapacitated? Confirmed, Jessica replied, her voice cracking. Captain appears to have suffered cardiac arrest. First officer is also unconscious. We have no one to fly the aircraft. There was a brief pause, then, Flight 447, maintain current heading and altitude. We're getting help. Stand by. You don't understand. Jessica's composure finally broke. There's no one to maintain anything. The plane is descending. She rushed back into the cabin, her pale face immediately signaling to her colleague, Mark Stevens, that something was catastrophically wrong. Both pilots are down, she whispered urgently. Get on the PA. We need to find anyone with flight experience. Now. Mark's eyes widened in horror as the full gravity sank in. He grabbed the PA microphone with shaking hands. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a technical issue. If anyone aboard has any flight experience of any kind, please press your call button immediately. The carefully worded announcement sent a ripple of concern through the cabin. Passengers began looking around anxiously. Hartford in 9C leaned forward, whispering to his seatmate, that doesn't sound like a technical issue to me. When no call buttons illuminated, Mark tried again, unable to keep the urgency from his voice. This is an emergency announcement. We need anyone with any aviation experience, pilots, flight instructors, military, even experienced flight simulator users. Please identify yourselves immediately. Now panic began spreading through the cabin like wildfire. A woman in row 14 started crying. A man demanded to know what was happening. The businessman in first class stood up, ignoring the seatbelt sign, his voice rising above the growing chaos. What kind of emergency? Tell us what's going on. The altitude continued dropping, 28,800 feet. 28,500 feet. 28,200 feet. The girls stepped forward. In row 9, Sarah and Emma exchanged a meaningful glance. Emma's hand found her sister's, squeezing tight. They both understood what the urgent announcements meant, and they both knew what no one else in that cabin knew. They had over 200 hours of logged simulator time on a Boeing 737. They had studied systems, procedures, and emergency protocols since they were 5 years old. They knew how to read instruments, manage autopilot systems, and execute emergency procedures. But they were 8 years old. Sarah, Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the growing commotion in the cabin. Should we? Sarah gripped her flight manual tighter, her knuckles white. Their father's words echoed in her mind, only help if no one else can. But if you're the only option, never hesitate to do what's right. They looked around the cabin one more time. No hands raised. No call buttons lit. No voices volunteering. Just growing panic and terror. The plane shuddered, a more noticeable vibration this time, and Mark made one final desperate announcement, please. If anyone has even basic flight simulator experience, we need your help right now. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stood up slowly, her small hand reaching for the call button. The chime cut through the chaos like a church bell. Excuse me, she said in a clear, calm voice that seemed impossibly composed for an 8-year-old child. Nearby passengers turned to look at her in confusion. Excuse me. Sarah called louder. We can fly. The entire cabin fell silent as if someone had pressed mute on the world. Jessica rushed over, kneeling to the girl's eye level. Sweetie, she said as gently as possible under the circumstances, this isn't a game. We need actual pilots. Emma stood beside her sister, and when she spoke, her voice carried a confidence that seemed to belong to someone much older. Our father is Captain James Mitchell. He's an instructor at the United States Air Force Academy. He's been training us since we were 5 years old. Hartford in 9C stood up, his voice incredulous and angry. You're joking, right? You want to let children fly the plane? Sarah turned to face him, and in her eyes was a depth of knowledge and calm that few adults could muster in a crisis. Sir, we've logged 247 hours in a high-fidelity Boeing 737 simulator. We know the systems. We've practiced emergency procedures hundreds of times. We know instrument flying, navigation, and emergency landing protocols. Emma added, her voice urgent, Ma'am, every second we waste, we lose more altitude. We're at 27,900 feet now. If we don't level off soon, we'll lose too much altitude to recover safely. Jessica stared at the girls, seeing something extraordinary in their composure. These weren't ordinary children pretending to be pilots. They spoke with technical precision, their body language showed training, and most importantly, they were the only option they had. Do you know the Boeing 737-800 specifically? Jessica asked. Sarah opened her flight manual to a detailed systems diagram. This is a 737-800, right? Twin CFM 56-7B engines, fly-by-wire system with 3 hydraulic systems, manual reversion capability, and glass cockpit with primary flight display and navigation display. Jessica's jaw dropped. The technical knowledge was far beyond what a child could have memorized without understanding. She looked around the cabin desperately one more time. Does anyone else have any flight experience? Silence. The altitude reading showed 27,600 feet and dropping steadily. Jessica made the hardest decision of her life. Okay. Come with me. Both of you. The cockpit. As Jessica led the twins toward the cockpit, the cabin erupted in shouting. Some passengers supported the decision, what choice did they have, while others protested vehemently. Hartford's voice rose above the rest, this is insane. We're all going to die. But Sarah and Emma moved forward with purpose, their faces set with determination that belied their age. When they entered the cockpit and saw both pilots slumped unconscious, alarm flickered across their faces for just a moment before training took over. Check for pulses, Sarah said to Jessica, her voice steady. Jessica checked both pilots. Torres had none. Chen had a weak, irregular pulse but was completely unresponsive. Sarah slipped into the left seat, the captain's seat. Her feet didn't reach the rudder pedals, but her hands could reach all the essential controls. Emma took the first officer's seat, pulling Chen's unconscious form to the side as gently as possible. We need to contact someone who can help us, Sarah said, reaching for the radio. And we need to level off the aircraft immediately. She scanned the instruments with practiced efficiency, altitude 27,300 feet and decreasing, airspeed 420 knots, too fast, heading 270 degrees toward Denver, engine stable. Her father's voice echoed in her memory from countless training sessions, first, fly the aircraft. Second, navigate. Third, communicate. Sarah's hands moved to the autopilot panel. She engaged altitude hold, and the aircraft immediately began leveling off at their current altitude of 27,100 feet. The descent stopped. Autopilot engaged, altitude hold, Sarah announced professionally. Emma, call out engine parameters. Emma scanned the engine instruments. Engine 1, N1 85%, EGT normal, fuel flow normal. Engine 2, N1 85%, EGT normal, fuel flow normal. All systems showing green. Sarah keyed the radio. Denver Center, Flight 447. This is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 8 years old, and my sister Emma and I are the only people on board with any flight training. We've taken control of the aircraft. The stunned silence from air traffic control lasted several long seconds before a controller responded, his voice carefully controlled despite obvious shock. Flight 447, Denver Center. Please repeat your last transmission. Denver Center, both pilots are unconscious. I'm Captain James Mitchell's daughter. My sister and I have over 200 hours of simulator training on the 737. We need help landing this plane. Can you contact our father at the Air Force Academy immediately? In the Denver Center control room, controllers stared at each other in disbelief. The senior controller, Marcus Rodriguez, quickly took charge. Flight 447, we copy. Stand by. We're contacting your father now and getting our best pilots on the line. Can you maintain your current altitude and heading? Affirmative, Denver Center. Autopilot is engaged. Altitude 27,100 feet, heading 270. All systems appear normal except both pilots are down. Rodriguez immediately got on another line to the Air Force Academy while simultaneously coordinating with retired airline Captain Patricia Wade, who happened to be in the control center as a training observer that day. Get me Captain James Mitchell at the Air Force Academy, immediately. Rodriguez barked. Tell him it's a life-or-death emergency involving his daughters. Within 3 minutes, 3 agonizing minutes during which Sarah and Emma maintained steady control of the aircraft, Captain James Mitchell's voice crackled over the radio. Sarah. Emma. This is Dad. Can you hear me? Both girls felt tears prick their eyes at hearing their father's voice, but they pushed the emotion aside. Dad. We're here. Both pilots are unconscious. We're at 27,100 feet, heading 270, autopilot engaged. What do we do? Captain Mitchell's voice was remarkably calm, though anyone who knew him well would have detected the undercurrent of terror for his daughters. But he was a professional military instructor, and right now, his girls needed an instructor, not a panicking father. You're doing beautifully, angels. First, I need you to do exactly as I say. Sarah, you're in the left seat. Emma, you're monitoring systems and instruments. Correct? Correct, Dad, they replied in unison. Okay. Sarah, I need you to check the fuel state. Look at the fuel quantity indicators on your overhead panel. Sarah tilted her head back, reading the displays. Fuel remaining shows 12,400 pounds. About 2,000 pounds per hour consumption rate. Perfect. That gives us over 6 hours of fuel. We have plenty of time. Emma, I need you to monitor all the warning lights and system indicators. Call out anything abnormal. Emma scanned the panel systematically. All hydraulic systems showing normal pressure. All electrical systems normal. Fire detection systems, all clear. Door warnings, all doors closed and locked. Everything looks green, Dad. The approach. For the next 90 minutes, Captain Mitchell talked his daughters through every step of preparing for landing. Patricia Wade, the retired airline captain, contributed expert advice while Denver Center cleared all other traffic from their airspace and prepared Denver International Airport for the most unusual emergency landing in aviation history. Every news helicopter within 100 miles was converging on Denver. Television networks interrupted regular programming. The story had gone viral within minutes, 2 8-year-old girls attempting to land a commercial airliner. Sarah, we're going to start descending now, Captain Mitchell instructed. I want you to disengage the altitude hold and select a descent rate of 1,500 feet per minute. Sarah's small hand moved to the autopilot panel. Disengaging altitude hold. Setting vertical speed to negative 1,500. The aircraft began descending smoothly. Emma called out altitudes every 1,000 feet. 26,000 feet. 25,000 feet. 24,000 feet. Excellent, girls. Now, Sarah, I need you to reduce speed. Pull the throttles back slowly until your airspeed shows 280 knots. Sarah carefully eased the throttle levers backward. The engine's pitch decreased, and the aircraft began slowing. Speed reducing through 320. 300, 280 knots. Speed stabilized at 280. Perfect. Emma, how are our systems? All systems still normal, Dad. Hydraulics good, engines running smooth, no warnings. In the cabin, passengers sat in tense silence. Jessica had explained the situation, and remarkably, most had accepted it. What choice did they have? Some prayed. Some cried quietly. But many watched the cockpit door with something approaching awe. Those tiny girls, barely tall enough to see over the instrument panel, were flying a Boeing 737. As they descended through 15,000 feet, Captain Mitchell walked them through extending flaps incrementally, reducing speed, and configuring the aircraft for landing. Each instruction was followed precisely, professionally. Flight 447, you're 40 miles from Denver International, Air Traffic Control reported. Turn right heading 120 for base leg. Right turn heading 120, Sarah acknowledged, manipulating the autopilot heading selector smoothly. The Denver skyline appeared ahead, and beyond it, the massive spread of Denver International Airport with its distinctive white peaked terminal roof. Sarah, Emma, listen carefully, their father's voice was steady but filled with emotion. You're about to do something incredibly difficult. But I know you can do this. You've trained for this. Remember, fly the airplane first, always. Trust your instruments. And trust yourselves. We trust you, Dad, Sarah replied. At 10 miles from the airport, Sarah extended the landing gear. The rumble of the extending gear filled the cabin, and green lights illuminated on the panel. Gear down, 3 green lights, Emma reported. Final flaps, Sarah. Flaps 30. The aircraft settled into its final landing configuration, slowing to 150 knots as it turned onto final approach. The runway stretched ahead, a thin concrete ribbon that looked impossibly narrow from their altitude. Flight 447, you're cleared to land runway 34R. Wind calm. Emergency equipment standing by. Cleared to land 34R, Flight 447, Sarah responded, her voice calm despite her racing heart. At 1,000 feet, Captain Mitchell said, Sarah, I need you to disconnect the autopilot now. You're going to hand-fly the landing. Emma, call out altitudes and airspeed. Sarah's hand moved to the autopilot disconnect button. She pressed it, and suddenly the full weight of manually controlling 130,000 pounds of aircraft fell onto her small hands. The plane wobbled slightly. That's normal, Angel, her father reassured her immediately. Feel the airplane. Small, gentle corrections. You've got this. Sarah steadied the aircraft, her hands finding the natural rhythm of the controls. I have control, Dad. 500 feet, Emma called out. Airspeed 145 knots. Start reducing power, Sarah. Throttles back slowly. Sarah eased the throttles backward. The engine's roar decreased. 400 feet. Airspeed 140. Good. Keep the centerline. Small corrections. 300 feet. Airspeed 138. The runway rushed up to meet them. Sarah could see the landing zone markings clearly now. 200 feet. Airspeed 135. Start your flare, Sarah. Ease back on the yoke. Let the airplane settle. Sarah pulled the yoke gently toward her chest. The aircraft's nose rose slightly, the main landing gear reaching for the runway. 100 feet. 50 feet. 30 feet. The main wheels kissed the runway with barely a bump. A perfect touchdown. The nose wheel settled a moment later. Spoilers up. Captain Mitchell called. Emma reached for the speed brake lever and pulled it up. Spoilers deployed on the wings. Reverse thrust, Sarah. Sarah pulled the reverse thrust levers. The engines roared as they redirected their thrust forward, decelerating the massive jet. The Boeing 737 rolled down the runway, slowing steadily. Sarah applied the wheel brakes carefully, just as she'd practiced countless times in the simulator. At 40 knots, she guided the aircraft onto the taxiway and brought it to a complete stop. Flight 447 is on the ground safely, Sarah announced into the radio, her voice finally cracking with emotion. We're stopped on taxiway Alpha. The cabin erupted. Passengers cheered, cried, hugged strangers. Jessica rushed into the cockpit and wrapped both girls in a fierce embrace. Emergency vehicles swarmed the aircraft. Paramedics rushed aboard to treat the pilots. Sadly, Captain Torres had passed away, but First Officer Chen was stabilized and would eventually make a full recovery. As Sarah and Emma were helped down the stairs by waiting emergency personnel, a crowd of airport workers, first responders, and airline personnel burst into spontaneous applause. The girls held hands, overwhelmed and exhausted. Captain James Mitchell arrived within 2 hours, having broken every speed limit between Colorado Springs and Denver. He ran across the tarmac and swept both daughters into his arms, sobbing with relief and pride. Later, at a press conference, with his daughters on either side, Captain Mitchell told the world, "I trained them to be pilots, but I never imagined they'd have to save 147 lives at 30,000 feet. Today, my daughters became heroes. But more than that, they proved that courage and knowledge have no minimum age requirement." The Federal Aviation Administration issued a special commendation to Sarah and Emma Mitchell. Their story inspired countless young people to pursue aviation. The flight manual Sarah had clutched throughout the ordeal was donated to the Smithsonian. Flight 447 became a legend, not for what went wrong, but for what went impossibly, miraculously right. Two 8-year-old girls, trained by their father, guided by professionals on the ground, and fueled by courage and competence, had achieved what most would have thought impossible. They had flown. And they had saved everyone.